Have you ever gone to a pond and you've taken a stone and you've thrown it into the pond? What happens when you throw a stone into a pond? There's a splash and then what? There's a ripple, isn't it? It starts off and the ripple goes out and it extends all the way to the end of the pond. And if your pond is small enough, it'll reach every corner of that pond. And everything that's living in that pond or around that pond knows that something has just happened because they can see the ripple coming towards them. There was a ripple that started in Jerusalem. A ripple that affected not only the people in Jerusalem, not only the people in Judea and the surrounding towns, but this ripple, my friends, went out and affected everybody in the world. And when this ripple went out, there were some people that were very happy about the event that just took place. There were some people that were frightened by the event that just took place, and they went and they hid. There were some people who didn't know what to do. What shall we do? There, hanging up on the tree, was a man. And this event, my friends, threatened a lot of people. There was a lady, and she was elderly. And when this event took place and this ripple started to go out, she said, I need to leave Jerusalem. I need to leave the town. I need to hide because my life might be in danger. I need to go. And in the cover of darkness, she left Jerusalem. She snuck out and she went from bush to bush, fence to fence. She made her way through the valleys. And she only travelled at night because she was afraid that if she travelled during the day, somebody would recognise her and they would just take that woman. Take that woman. Fear was in her heart. You could hear her heart pounding. Boom, 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 boom. She snuck along for days. She wouldn't eat. She was afraid to sleep just in case. And as she went along one night, she looked up there and on the hill, there was this old shack. And she thought, I wonder if anybody lives in that old building. So cautiously she creeped up the hill in their cover of darkness, listening very carefully in case there was a noise of people getting around. Maybe there was somebody sleeping in the hut, so she listened for the snoring. She listened for people getting up and wandering around. There was nothing, so she crept closer, and she crept closer. And when she got to the hut, she found there was but 3 walls. And when she went into the hut, she found the hut had a ceiling, but the ceiling was on the floor. It had collapsed. There were no doors, there were no windows. But there was nobody in there either. So she went inside. And as she stood on top of the mountain, on top of this hill, in this wonderful little hut, she said, I could hide in here. Obviously nobody comes here because it is so broken down. And she stood and she looked down and she could see a little village just down from where she was. And she thought, this might be perfect. I can sneak down at night. I can sneak into the village and perhaps find myself something to eat. I can sneak down and perhaps find myself something to wear. So she laid down on that ceiling that was made of straw. She formed that ceiling into a bed and she went to sleep. And for the first time in a long time, she was able to sleep. She waited till the next night. She got the courage. And she said, I'm going to go and find something to eat. So she snuck down into the village. She found some food, took a little bit of this and a little bit of that while people were sleeping. She went along to the clothesline and she found some women's clothing hanging up on the line. And she picked some dresses here, some other garment here. And she said, it doesn't matter whether they fit me or not, I'm going to take them. She didn't have the luxury of standing in the shop like we do. When we go shopping, hey ladies, and we go, do I like this garment? Do I like the colour of this garment? Does it fit me? Does it And what do the men say? We say nothing, don't we? We say, yes, darling, that is beautiful, fits you every time. Wise men. But she didn't have the luxury of doing that. So she just picked a garment, and when she went back up onto the hill, she wore and squeezed herself into whatever she had. And she ate a meal. And she had something to drink, and she thought, wonderful. This is beautiful. This went on for a couple of days and a couple of nights, and she felt very comfortable. And she started to let her guard down, and she went to sleep most peacefully. Well, my friends, one morning she was still asleep, sleeping in like we do sometimes, dreaming of all sorts of wonderful things, when suddenly she felt that there was somebody else in the room with her. And she was afraid to look up. She was afraid to open her eyes. She was afraid to turn around to see if there is somebody. And if there was somebody, was it one of the Roman soldiers? Was it somebody that she should be afraid of? Have you ever had that feeling there was somebody in the room with you when you're asleep and you just wake up and you go, ooh, no? Oh, I have. It's a scary feeling sometimes. And she said, I must look. And she turned around and she opened her eyes. And there, standing in the so-called doorway, was this young girl. She was only about this tall. And this girl was standing there, and she had the eyes of an owl. You ever seen an owl with really big eyes? She had these really big eyes. Big eyes. And she was looking at this lady on the ground. And then eventually she goes, ooh. See, I told you she was an owl. She goes, ooh, ooh, who are you? And the lady looked. She got up. She ran past this girl in the doorway. She ran around the hut to make sure there was nobody else. And then she went back in the hut and she looked at the girl. And the girl said to her one more time with conviction, who are you? And the lady said, it doesn't really matter who I am. Who are you? And the girl said, oh, I'm Elizabeth. I come from the village. My father owns this house. And the girl said, oh, the lady said, oh, look, I'm no threat to you and your family. I just came out of Jerusalem because I was afraid. I needed somewhere to stay. And I found this hut, and I've been living here. And the girl says, oh, okay. And the lady said to the girl, can you keep a secret? What happens when we say, can you keep a secret? The person says, oh yeah, I can keep a secret. Hey? Oh yeah. And all they're thinking is, tell me so I can tell somebody else. Hey? You want people to know something. Don't put it in the newspaper. Tell somebody and say, can you keep a secret? And they say, yeah. And then it goes everywhere, my friends. Save yourself some money, all right? And she went to the girl and she said, okay, if you can keep a secret. And she said, I had to leave Jerusalem because he was hanging on a tree. My son was hanging on a tree. The little girl goes, and she ran down that hill all the way to the village, and as she was running down to the village, she got so excited her little legs couldn't keep up with her, and she rolled a few times, and she got up and dusted her, and she ran. She said, Mom, Dad, I've got to tell you something. You see, she kept secrets, and she ran into the house, and Dad said, don't. Settle down, Elizabeth. What's the trouble? She said, I got a secret. I got to tell you. I got a secret. I got to tell you. And Mum and Dad go, whoa, hang on, isn't it a secret? She says, oh, yes. But you keep secrets, don't you, Mum and Dad? Mum and Dad keep secrets, yeah. And they said, of course, Elizabeth, we keep secrets. And there we have the chain that goes on and on and on. And she said, Mrs. J is in our unit. She's up there on the hill. Mum and Dad go, what is you? What? Let's go. So they went up, and there was a lady, and she was petrified because there was more people. And they said, excuse me, but this is our hut. What are you doing here? And she said, look, there was problems in Jerusalem. I was afraid for my life. My son was on a tree. They said, Mrs. J. And they went down the village and they told other people, and other people came up and they said, Mrs. J, we are so honoured to have you here. So honoured to. We will fix the hut for you. We will give you food to eat. Just tell us stories about your son, please. And she said, okay. If you promise not to tell anybody. They said, we promise. So they fixed the hut up for her. They gave her clothing. They gave her food to eat. And she told them stories about her son. My son was there when Peter wanted to walk on the water. And foolishly, he then started to drown. My son was there when there were thousands of people getting fed. My son was there when a blind man got his sight back. My son was there. My son was there. And she told the stories of her son. And people went and told other villagers. And the other villagers told other villagers. And next thing there was people from everywhere coming to hear the stories. And they would sit around outside the hut and they would say, Mrs. J, come tell us a story about your son. Come tell us, we want to know more about your son. We want to know about all those wonderful things that he was involved in. We want to know all the miracles. And she would come and tell them the stories where her son was involved and in all those wonderful gifts. Well, you know, it was one beautiful sunny day a bit like this when she was sitting out on the lean-to looking out towards the group of people. And she was telling them a story about her son. And the congregation was a bit quiet like this. They were taking it all in. And just then as she was having a breather, somebody in the back yelled out, Mrs. J, Mrs. J. She said, yes. He said, Mrs. J, tell us more about your son Jesus. Tell us more what Jesus has done. And she looked at them. She looked at all the people. And she said, well, I don't know what Jesus has done. I can't tell you any stories about Jesus. But you are Mrs. J, they said. You are the mother of Jesus. That's why we have you here. That's why we're looking after you. That's why we're giving you clothing, because you are Jesus' mother. And she said, well, I've got to tell you the truth. I'm not. I'm not Jesus' mother. I don't know where you got that idea from. But they said, but you told us about Peter walking on the water. You told us about your son hanging on the tree. You are Jesus' mother. She said, no, no. I am the mother of Judas. I am the mother of Judas. Judas was there when Jesus fed all the people. Judas was there when Peter walked on the water. I never said my son was Jesus, but you said that your son was hanging on the tree. You said there was a ripple in Jerusalem. That's why you went away. And she said, yes, my son did hang himself on a tree. And I had to leave in shame in case people were going to come after me. And they sat there quietly, looking at her. And they started to look at one another, some in disgust, some in horror, some in sheer confusion. And they started to mumble as you are starting to mumble now. And they said, away with you, we don't want you if you're Judas' mother. We thought you were. And they started to get hostile towards her. And they started to yell abuse at her. And they started to turn their back on her and said, go away. And they left. They left. They left. My friends, the story of Mrs. J is one to make us think. She never said who she was, did she? And yet they assumed, they judged her by the stories. They judged her by the way she was acting. They judged her by the way she was looking. Yet nobody, my friends, Nobody had asked her who she really was. And when they thought she was somebody important, when they thought that she was Jesus' mother, the world was her oyster. Anything she wanted, they would get her. Anything she would say, they would do. And then, when they found out she wasn't Jesus' mother, what did they do? They turned their back on her. They turned. Are we any different? Do we judge people? All the time. I do. I need to confess. We see somebody coming in the door, and the first thing we do is we look at them and we say, are they an Adventist? What do they really want? Look at the way they're dressed. When we see people in the street walking past, we look at them and say, are they drugs? Are they on drugs? Are they on alcohol? Look at have they had a shower? Have they washed? Are they the sort of people that I want to talk to? Yeah. As Christians, we shouldn't be judging, should we? And we say we don't judge. But do we? When people go looking for Jesus and they're seeking Christ and they come into churches where there's judgment going on, they ask themselves, what's the difference between a church where people judge and the pub where people don't? Do you hear that? I have been in churches, my friends, where the judgment is so strong amongst one another that you can feel it, you hear it, and you know all about it. And a person would say, this sort of judgment doesn't happen in the pub, so I might as well stay there. Basically because they're all drunk anyway, so they don't know what they're talking about. But we should be better, shouldn't we? We shouldn't be judging. We shouldn't be judging on colour of the skin. We shouldn't be judging on whether we think a person is really smart or doesn't have a good education. It doesn't matter. Jesus said we are what? All equal. Let me just read this to you. In the book of Matthew, in Matthew chapter 7, Jesus says, do not judge, or you too will be judged. And hear this. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother or sister, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, says Jesus, first time take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck that is in your brother's or sister's eye. You know, when we judge people, my friends, when we judge people, whether it's in our families, whether it's in our churches, in our communities, we start to gossip. And gossip does nothing but destroy people. And that is nothing new, for we find that in the Old Testament, here in Proverbs, it says here in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 18, it says, and gossip separates close friends. If you want to separate people, if you want to separate a church, gossip. If you want to separate a family, gossip. Yeah? Gossip is the greatest thing that destroys people. Our glossy magazines, our TV shows are all about what? Gossip. You know, I heard something today about Nathan, I bet you that you guys haven't heard. And we think we're pretty good because we've got something. And then we say, oh, all right, I'll tell you. And we gossip, and we gossip, and we gossip. And that destroys a person. Why? Because the gossip is not true, hey? It ends up destroyed. It ends up distorted. Have you ever played Chinese whispers? Yeah, good Adventists play Chinese whispers. You have 10 people lined up, and you might say over here, the red duck wears pants. And they whisper and whisper and whisper. And by the time it gets to this ant's end, we find that the red ants likes ducks. And you go, how'd that happen? It gets distorted as it goes along. Gossip destroys. Gossip destroys. It destroys our communities. It destroys everything else. When we judge other people, we start gossiping. I don't like that lady there in the back row because she wears glasses. Yeah, I wouldn't trust her because she wears glasses. So then I tell somebody else. And then we all go, well, Andy said we can't trust that lady because she wears glasses. So my judgment, my bad judgment now is spread around through gossip. My friends, we are in a world where we can judge as much as we like and whoever we like. But Jesus says, don't judge. Because the way you judge other people is the way that you're going to be judged. Are they doing drugs? They're still human beings. They still have the same feelings that we have. They're still seeking the same love that we're seeking. Yeah. My friends, we have an opportunity to go out and show people who Jesus is by showing the love, his character, what he is and what he can do. Not by judging and putting people down. My dream is that we fill this church to overfilling. That we find a church so big that we can't fill it either. Why? Because it's a place where people want to go. A place where they feel safe and comfortable. A place where they know they won't be judged. May we try as hard as possible, with God's help, not to be judgmental of other people. And please, don't be judgmental of yourself either. Are you judgmental of yourself? I think we are. I am. I'm not good enough for God. Have you ever said that? Yeah. Who told you that? Who ever told you that you're not good enough for God? Satan. God has come and given his life for you and for me. And we are more than good enough. We are perfect for God. We might sin, but we are perfect for God. My friends, I leave you today with the prayer and the hope that as people look upon us, they see us as non-judgmental people. Amen. I like that song on top of the mountain. God on top. What was that song you sang this morning? Can you come out and sing that for us? Well, let's have that as our closing song. Lord, I want to thank you for the song that Jackie just shared with us. Lord, it is true. You are the God of the mountain. You're also the God of the valley. There are many times we find ourselves in the valley and we think you never come down there, but you drag us out and you take us out, sometimes kicking and screaming. We want to thank you for that. Lord, we have loved ones, there are friends and relatives we know, and there are people that we don't even know who are stuck in the valley. Lord, help us to be able to share some light with them. Help us to be able to show them that you are down there helping them as well, so that they too can come up on top of the mountain with you. Lord, I pray that you bless and guide each person here today. Give them the opportunity to shine your light, their light, upon this community, upon the distant communities, so that other people will come and give their hearts and lives to you. For this I ask in your name. Amen. Thank you, sister. Thank you very much.